Hello and welcome to another Pathfinder Friday. As always, I'm your old buddy Dan, and we are here to deconstruct Doomsday Dawn Chapter 2 in Pale Mountain Shadow.
Yeah.
Yes. I am here with Logan Bonner, but first, it's important that I let you know. Number one, there's going to be some spoilers for Chapter 2. If you haven't played that yet, you might want to take a break, kick back, not watch this one for a little while. Unless you're planning on GMing it, then you're going to get some amazing insight, and you're going to want to join us for this show. Second of all, Daigle, thanks for being in the chat. Can you allow that chat that's being held, because it should go through. So, sorry. Let that one go. Second of all, I want to thank you for joining us. I hope that you've been enjoying some of the new programming that we've been adding to the stream. It's been busy, and there's a lot more changes coming, so I'm kind of excited about that. Hang with us. It's going to get better, I promise. Thank you, buddy. Again, and to all the subs that are joining us, thank you for joining us. To everybody else for joining us, thank you for joining us. We're ready to do some deconstructing of Doomsday Dawn. And that brings me to Logan Bonner, the GM of the last 2 weeks that has taken the team through some peril. You fought some manticore.
I think they felt imperiled a little bit.
They did. Yeah. And you know, when that's going on, when those games are happening, I'm in the chat and doing the behind the scenes, and more than a couple times I saw TPK. I thought it was coming. I almost did a straw poll. I don't know.
I think they were doing better than it looked like.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of entertainment and kind of that morbid fascination with, oh, maybe we'll see this. Like this might happen.
Will the stream end an hour early because they'll wipe?
And we what would we do? So this is the thing. As a GM,
we just sit there.
We just sit like nobody talk.
Yeah.
And then somebody coughs and everyone's like, what? And then it's just quiet again. It is Dan Tharp. Hey, how you doing? Thanks for joining us. So again, and also I got some commands for Nightbot. I took care, really quick, I took care of Nightbot. So Nightbot is not going to put you in a timeout if you use an emote a couple times more than what it wants you to do. I kind of relaxed it a little bit because it starts off really angry at you for doing things. So hopefully we don't get folks getting put in timeout anymore. I felt pretty bad about that. So yeah, it should be better. I also put some commands in there. So feel free to do that. There's a topic. If somebody just joins us, you can, and somebody says, hey, what's the show about today? ! Topic should bring up a basic idea. During gameplay, I'm working on a game, ! Game, so that it'll bring up the GM and the players and the characters and their ancestries and all that sort of thing. So hopefully that'll help you when new people show up, that you can give them an idea of what's happening. And of course you can hit I command and it'll give you a link that takes you to all of the commands that are available. So no, we're not in a game right now, but believe me, when it happens, it's going to be so useful. So so there you go. I've caught everybody up. I'm sorry about the little diversion, Logan. We have a hard out at 5. Like we have to be done at 5 because Glass Cannon is playing. So I'm not trying to take up your time here.
We'll speed to Q&A as quickly as possible
so
people can shoot questions out.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. So I think we got the spoiler warning out of the way. I think that the part 3 starts Monday. Chapter 3 starts Monday. So we're moving on from Chapter 2, which is the whole point of the show, is to kind of rehash Chapter 2, talk about some of the things.
And one thing I want to emphasize to people,
please.
So I think it's always worth mentioning is we're still going to be collecting data on Part 2. We know that these windows are pretty tight, and not everybody's going to be able to play through the whole adventure in that time. So this is going to be kind of a debrief of what we got so far. But we're going to keep getting info on Part 2. It's always just kind of the focus, the section we're looking at. So when Part 3 is going and you are getting to Part 2 late, you can still fill out your survey, get information back to us. That's great.
Right. Don't let our schedule make you not answer or not fill out those surveys.
Yeah. And the real deadline is December, as Jason likes to say. It's like, that's all this stuff, even at last minute survey results, can be super useful. So
okay, we're going all the way till 2019 with this thing, right?
Almost.
Is it the end of December?
The cusp. I'm not sure exactly, but It's going to be effectively it's when everybody leaves for the break.
Right.
That's kind of, yeah.
Okay. Well, you've got extra time is the point. But we're not exactly sure how long. But it's close. It's close to the rest of the year. So
if you haven't gotten to it yet, don't worry. It's still going to be good playtest feedback. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so let's get into this thing. The main reason, so when we get into the whole reason we did the live streams, there was I think 2 different forms of reasoning, and on one side for me it was let's just get this thing up and running, so we're actually doing some live play on our Twitch channel, and let's try to innovate some things that we haven't done or anything like that, which is almost all of it. So for me, it's a lot of figuring things out. For your team, you probably had some different reasonings as to why you wanted to do this live play.
I think there's a couple big ones. One is that it is kind of like all the players are playing this game at the same time, and we want to kind of have that community feel of like, yeah, we're all in this, kind of having similar experiences, playing through the same adventure, and to kind of show like, yeah, we're doing that here too. And especially because we wrote these adventures so long ago, and we've been working on other things until then. It kind of refreshes us on like, oh wait, what are people seeing right now? And even the rules, we've have various ideas on them after the release version. So it's like, it's nice to kind of put ourselves back in the mindset of everybody else engaging with the rules right now. And the other thing was to kind of get some of the folks around the office kind of out there, and so people can kind of get to know them better. So like if you come to PaizoCon and you see Samantha, you can be like, oh hey, I saw you on the stream. Chewing fire and stuff. And it's nice to kind of like get everybody out in the audience to know the folks here working on the game a little bit better.
Yeah, absolutely. I think with things like talking about having our staff playing in the game, some folks I saw in the chat were like, well, this seems kind of weird having people act like they don't know how to play. But truthfully, there's a lot of us around the office that aren't involved in the development.
And even a lot of the folks on like the development and editing teams, because they're still working on first edition books, a lot of them are still really steeped in that. So they haven't had time to fully digest all the rules of the new version because they got to get the books out right. So even like Daigle doesn't know every single rule that's in the book, even if he's got kind of a better idea than most folks out there did as of release. Right.
So let's get into the playtest.
Okay.
Let's get into the live play that we did for the last 2 weeks. I believe it was a cumulative 6 hours of gameplay that we did for Chapter 2.
Which is shortened down by a lot, because the adventure is taking most groups more than that.
Okay.
And that's without, kind of talking to the audience and everything, right? Some of the stuff you need to do for a stream and kind of explain things. This is just like for their home game. Most of their groups are taking more than 6 hours to complete it.
Right.
And it is a little bit of a longer adventure.
And was that to be expected, that it take longer than 6 hours?
And we knew we were going to have to trim some stuff out for the stream.
Right.
That's just kind of the nature of the beast. So.
And then also, it's not fully spoilery at that point.
Yeah.
There's still some surprises waiting around the corners for you.
Like, that room was not uninhabited.
Well, I think, and so as you're playing through the live play, there's got to be some things that surprised you, things that you didn't expect to have happen. What are some of the, I guess you'd like the unsung heroes of Chapter 2? What were some of those things that came out?
Yeah, so kind of like talking to the players, all of them thought it went relatively smoothly. I think the things that really stood out to me as a designer were the bard. That Inspire Courage made a big difference.
Yeah.
It's one of those kind of inconspicuous things, but that +1, it made some really important crits happen. It made some really important hits happen. And just Adam kind of keeping that up really made a big difference. It can be easy to kind of overlook those kind of things, but it's pretty strong.
A good buff. Good. Yeah, definitely.
And, dependable, right?
Yeah.
You're not spending a spell slot on it. You're spending the actions, and he had lingering performance, so he could keep that going without spending actions sometimes. That one I think was really strong. I know that the water or the cold damage against the fire elemental.
What was he saying? Frozen water?
Liquid ice.
Liquid
also
ice.
Known
That's
as
Andrew's catchphrase of liquid ice.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
And the Ray of Frost that Tondra was casting. Those both, like each of those was doing 8 more damage. So like he was throwing this, this liquid ice, missing, doing some splash damage, but still really hurting this thing because it's so weak against cold. I think the weakness rules. I think that was kind of showing like the weakness rules are pretty popular, and I think we've seen that in like our playtests, our demos before too.
Okay.
With the zombies, they're weak to slashing damage. We've seen that before, and it's nice to kind of see that again and have it show up in this adventure.
Right. It kind of it brings new meaning to the term "stay frosty."
Yeah.
Stay frosty, people.
But fire elementals don't like.
It's
to
a
hear
free
that.
show. Come on, everybody. It can't be the best jokes in the world.
Right. No joke writing team.
No, it's just me. I'm one little guy.
Another thing that Tondra mentioned really enjoying was the spontaneous heightening of his sorcerer spells.
Yeah.
Because he felt like he had enough spots in his spell repertoire where he could prepare some kind of weird corner case kind of spells, and he could still heighten his first level attack spells. So he felt like he had 6 slots instead of 4. That's one thing he mentioned to me.
Oh, really? Okay, yeah, that makes sense. And then and the element. So, and this is just what I noticed. And it's even coming up in chat right now. Is the elementals hit like a truck? King of Rock is saying.
Yeah.
Those were tough. Like
well,
that
especially the persistent fire damage on that fire elemental is really high for persistent damage. We were like, all right, it's a fire elemental. It's going to do all the fire.
Right.
Most things is like you're taking some persistent damage. It's like a D4, D6, but this is like it's like 2D4, which is quite a bit for this level. So,
yeah.
And that's kind of built that way on purpose. So it's interesting to see that in play and like how desperate they were to put themselves out.
At the very beginning of yesterday's game, was it only yesterday? Yeah, at the very beginning of yesterday's game, I was like, are they gonna TPK? These things are formidable.
Yeah.
And then they leave one and they run away from one, only to get dropped in the lap of 2 more. Like it was brutal.
There's one thing we've seen in playtest though that's kind of interesting though is especially in part 1, people are like, yeah, we just kept going and we died. And sometimes it's like, yeah, sometimes you got to retreat. Like we expect that you're going to play these adventures like you would a real adventure in your home game, and like retreating from the water elemental and the earth elemental, it's like that's a reasonable thing to do. And they can't leave that room. This is the best time if you're going to retreat. This is when to do it. So sometimes like a group running away isn't always the best for a stream, but like that's a reasonable thing for a party to do, and we do still want that kind of that threat in there,
right?
Where you don't just kind of say, well, we accomplished 5 encounters before resting, and that's the only thing that really matters. We do want you to kind of have to strategize and see what tactics people use in these adventures. Right.
And in the chat, because again, I was kind of running through chat as the whole thing was going on. There were some things that caused some consternation with the chat. There were some things that came up, and unfortunately, it's hard for me to not disrupt the game and get an answer on the fly like that. It's not like the way we're set up there. It's not really conducive to Q&A or interaction at all with the chat. Yeah.
Especially since we're on a tight time limit and already cutting stuff out of the adventure. It's like, how much more can we lose?
Right. So if you're in the chat and you're chatting along with us and you ask me a question, I can try my best to get that question to the GM, but it's really difficult. So there were some questions that didn't go answered. And the biggest... go ahead.
We had the one from the first session about the animal totem.
Yes.
And we kind of didn't answer that until the second session.
Right.
Because the animal totem says that it's anathema for you to use weapons. And that's something that we've been kind of looking at lowering or removing that restriction. And so for the live stream, we decided to playtest like, okay, you can just use weapons to kind of see what Samantha's character looked like if she was just able to use weapons and while having her kind of animal traits. And so we saw that she was kind of like mostly using her greatsword and occasionally biting. It's kind of a mixed result there, and what we're going to do is on Monday we're going to have our next update, and we're going to try kind of a slight loosening of the restriction where you can use weapons while you're not raging. So you're going to see in the Monday update that rule is changing some. That anathema is going to change. So,
Okay.
which means like if you're fighting a creature at range and you want to use a bow or something, you can stay out of range and you can shoot that bow rather than just kind of like, well, I can throw rocks, I guess.
Right.
Have it being your only option.
So it's one of those things where it is a work in progress. There's some, it's being looked at. So when the question came up, because I think it was actually presented in chat as like, oh, are you guys homebrewing that too? Because that's what I do. And, and I was like, that can't be what's happening. And so I didn't know what was going on. So I was curious to know. And then things get crazy and you forget to ask and all of that sort of thing. So I'm glad that we were able to clear that up a little bit, that there is some information coming in the official update on Monday, which keep in mind the official update is coming on Monday. And we're gonna get into that in a little bit, I believe.
Some more tidbits from that.
Yeah, great. And then there was some issues, I think it was in yesterday's show, because they're all blending together at this point. It was something about being frightened.
Because there's a trap that can frighten you. The mirror, the dark mirror that Andrew's alchemist looked into. There was a question like, does that apply to AC or not? Because it applies to.
That's right.
I think it says checks and saves. It's worded a little squirrely. So the gist of it is, because any check can be turned into a DC by just adding 10 to it instead of having you roll. AC is a type of DC, so frightened does apply to AC.
Okay.
But the wording of it is kind of misleading because it's saying all checks and saves, which saves seems to exclude AC, for example.
Yeah, that's true.
So we're working on rephrasing all those so they're a little clearer. But in that particular case, yes, the penalty from frightened does apply to AC. It's bad across the board. All your stuff is bad now. You're scared.
Right. Yeah. If you're scared, things are not good.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad that we can clear some of that up. Is that coming in Monday's update, or is that something that's being worked on for later?
That's more of a FAQ kind of clarification.
Okay.
So I don't believe we have anything in the update.
Okay.
I think we're still working on like how to get up kind of like a rules FAQ, and hopefully incorporating that into the update process or putting on the web page. But right now, because that update document is kind of in its last stages, we can't really do a whole lot more changes to it at this point.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
But that is how that rule works.
Okay. That sounds good. Yeah, I'm already seeing in the chat somebody's like, I did not get that from reading it in the book. So I'm glad that we and this really, truthfully, I'm glad that it came up. I'm glad that we have a chance to address it, and I'm glad that it was something that other people in the chat were like, this doesn't seem right. What's going on?
And that's true for any of the conditions that work like that. If something says it applies to checks, it's going to apply to any DC as well.
Yeah. And then those are the big things that I noticed. Was there anything else that kind of came up that you wanted to clear up?
Yeah, there's one other thing that I kind of messed up while I was running it, mostly because I was just like, you're running a game, getting a little bit distracted. The Vengeful Strike on the Anti-Paladin.
Okay.
I kind of waited a little too long to kind of say, oh, we're doing this. I kind of tried to smooth it over, a little bit. But you should really be doing that kind of before the attacker rolls damage. So the way it works is if you critically hit the Anti-Paladin gets to take a swing back at you. So
all right.
But I kind of brought it into like, because Sam had already kind of rolled her damage and was counting it up, and I was like, oh, but wait, before that 49 damage happens, here's her Vengeful Strike. But really, it's best to do that early because it can enfeeble you and reduce your damage, and so it's good to kind of get the timing on that. And we're not sure we like the timing on some abilities like that, where they're kind of interrupting other things. That's always kind of a pain at the table. So we might be looking at some of that to try to streamline it, so you're not trying to do things in the middle of someone else's action. Right. That can be really frustrating to run and as a player.
Yeah, absolutely. And then speaking of all of the stuff that we're doing here. Playing these games, taking the time day in, day out to figure this stuff out. It's all about the surveys. Like, that's the big thing that we're trying to do. We want to make sure that people are playing the games, filling out the surveys, because that's the whole point of the playtest, is trying to make sure that we have that sweet, sweet data so that we know what changes to make, which is happening on a bi-weekly basis. We're doing another update. So let's get into some of the data that we have for Chapter 2. There's still a weekend to go, right?
And we'll keep checking back in on it, until the end of the playtest. So,
right. But so far we have some data. I would imagine we've got some stuff.
We don't have nearly as much as we had on part 1.
Okay.
A few reasons for that. One is that, this is a 2-week window instead of 3 weeks, so that's a tighter time frame to get your group together to play through it. Another is that just like, we know there's always kind of going to be a slow drop off just as you go up in levels. People move on to other stuff. They don't want to play at higher levels, whatever it is.
Right.
And so, yeah, we don't have quite as many responses. We don't have as much data to work with, but we do have some pretty interesting numbers emerging so far.
Okay. All right. So when it comes, I like the stuff that probably is not as right away useful for you and your team, because I like the stuff where it's like, well, what are people playing?
Yeah.
All of that sort of thing. So, the characters, like what kind of like characters and ancestries and classes and stuff like that are people playing?
There's a lot of it that we kind of expected would be changing a little bit just because of how different the first chapter and the second chapter are.
Right.
So like one of the things is not as many people are playing goblins.
Okay.
But like the first chapter has a goblin specific background. So it's like, oh yeah, and there's a goblin part of the adventure. So like, oh yeah, playing a goblin makes a lot of sense. We aren't getting quite as much of that in this one. We also saw that a lot more people are playing druids and rangers.
Okay.
Which, like, I think, if you've been told this is kind of a more survival style adventure, those classes make a lot of sense to play.
Yeah.
And then also like, there might be fewer goblins because people are playing druids and rangers who like wisdom, and the goblin hates wisdom. So I think some of those are kind of related. But we have, I think we have actually some specific numbers on those. We kind of,
cool.
Jason kind of compiled some stuff here.
And really quick, while you're looking that up, I just want to answer Andy Musmask, I think is how you say it. The group will perpetually be missing the survey cutoff dates, which sure sucks, and that would suck. But the cutoff dates are actually at the end of December. Yeah. Again, keep that in mind. The surveys are going to be open until roughly the middle to end of December, somewhere in there. Yeah. So the cutoff date for us to move on to the next chapter is not the cutoff date for the surveys. Keep that in mind. If you have time and you're like, oh, we're going to be a week behind, still play, still turn in those surveys. So please, we want your feedback. Logan, sorry.
Yeah, no problem.
And back to you.
Yeah. So we saw a lot of things that are kind of like, this is a wildernessy adventure. So we saw more scouts and nomads for backgrounds. Both of those went up about 12%. Druids and rangers each went up about 15%. And all the other classes kind of stayed relatively the same.
Okay.
So we could see kind of like, those are changing. The other really cool thing is this is the first playtest where we had archetypes as an option.
Okay.
Because the first one, your first level, you can't take the feat to the second level.
Did they make a big difference?
So we saw that, especially, there were like 15% of characters had archetypes. So it's not a huge number. And again, we're working with smaller numbers on this survey. So that's not a huge amount of characters. But the most common thing we saw were bards, sorcerers, and wizards taking fighter. That was really common.
Oh, yeah.
Fighter was the most popular.
Okay.
A lot of that is because you get a lot of armor proficiencies. So a lot of them wanted to kind of be the armored sorcerer or wizard, kind of like Jason Tondra was playing in our session. He was doing a sorcerer fighter kind of build. So we saw that was super popular.
Okay.
Which is an interesting data point.
Yeah.
And we kind of knew like that's probably going to be a popular build, and we need to look at the math of that some more and kind of dig into that. We also asked kind of like, how important were your archetypes' abilities when you were playing, and people could rate that. They're usually rated very significant or somewhat significant. It goes on a scale from extreme all the way down to not at all significant. And these are kind of in the middle and the high middle. So that's, which I think is about where we want something that costs you a class feat to be sitting.
Right.
So I think that those are looking like they're mostly on track. So we're going to keep an eye on those numbers continuing on, but they look pretty good right now.
Okay. All right.
This was also the first adventure where you had starting at a higher level, so you had your starting magic items.
Yeah. Did those make a big difference in the game?
They did. There's kind of the weird thing is like fourth level is kind of a weird spot for your items because like third and fourth level are usually where the GM is dropping magic weapons into the adventures. Like maybe starting a little bit at third and happening a little more often at fourth. And this adventure is pretty light on magic weapons.
Okay.
So we found that 62% of characters took magic armor as their highest level item, because that is a third level item, and you're getting a third level item when you make a fourth level character.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So a lot of them had magic armor, so their defenses were a little bit higher, but they didn't have magic weapons. So like you can see, like the magic weapon spell is still really strong at this level.
Yeah.
It's still pretty useful. And Magic Fang similarly. And we also had 11% of people taking a lower level item or a consumable as their choice for their third level item, which are like monetarily, that's way less than taking a permanent item, but they might have just not had choices they like there. And so we're also looking at like, what do we do for people who want to take consumables or something instead of a permanent item? So maybe they get a batch of those, maybe they get some money they can spend on stuff instead of getting a permanent item. So those are options we might look at for the final version of the game, especially at lower levels where you don't have as many choices of permanent items and you might want something else.
Right.
Especially if you look at like a spellcaster, because braces of armor, if you're not wearing armor, braces of armor are a fourth level item. So it's like, okay, I don't have my armor, I don't have my weapon. What are my choices? And there aren't as many items at low levels. So we knew that was going to be kind of a hard choice for them.
Right.
And I think that's why some people took scrolls or wands or something instead.
Okay, right. And as far as the surveys go, are you able now to get a sense of what the play experience is like kind of overall?
Yeah. So we monitor a few things with that. One is like the time it takes you to do things, the time it takes you to play through the sessions, to create your characters. Like I said, I think it was like a 6.5 hours to play through roughly. Okay. Average. Obviously, that's gonna skew a bit in both directions.
More exploration, more RPG or RP and all that kind of stuff.
We did see that the creation time to make a character has changed somewhat.
Okay.
And the interesting thing is it got shorter. So you're making a fourth level character, but it got shorter.
Oh, right.
Because you're more experienced at making characters now.
That makes a lot more sense. Yeah, I get that. Okay.
So yeah, it went down by about 10 minutes. Total.
All right.
Character
it's not bad. Yeah.
And it's going to be really interesting to see how that goes for the other adventures, right? Like when you're making a 7th level character, like that's a bigger jump than 1st to 4th.
Right.
Going from 4th to 7th, you're getting, higher level spells and that kind of thing. You're really getting more stuff to choose from. Or I'm sorry, the average completion time is 6 hours 40 minutes. So a little.
Okay. Oh, okay. So just under 7. That's not bad. That's a pretty good chapter.
Yeah.
Okay.
We also we had new Death and Dying rules for this, which we released those Monday before last.
Yeah. 2 weeks ago.
So we saw again. This has a little less data, so it's not it's not super clear that this is making a huge difference. But we did see the number of characters who died go up to about 7%. But around 5% if you're using the new Death and Dying rules.
Okay.
So I think part of that is some of these situations, this adventure, are more perilous. They're like if you get knocked unconscious when you're in the river, there's a higher chance you're going to die than if you're on the floor of a dungeon.
Yeah.
In the first chapter.
Okay.
So there are a few more situations where like you could just not be saved.
Yeah.
So I think that's part of the thing contributing to more deaths. But the new Death and Dying rules are a little more generous than the old ones. The old ones did make it easier to TPK because you didn't know how long it was going to take someone to get back into the fight if they'd been healed. So they could be sitting there whiffing for 5 rounds straight while everybody else is dropping around them. And you also kept the dying condition when you came back. So if somebody knocked you down, you could die instantly. So I think both those things kind of being out of the system means that it is less random that you're going to die, certainly.
Yeah. Let's see. So we've got new rules, the new thing. How? And I see one side of the feedback.
Yeah.
Just so you know. And what I see, and I don't know if we want to address this now or not, but I see a lot of talk about resonance. People not so happy about it. People have things to say about it. Right off the bat, can you tell, is that working like you've intended it to work?
It is giving us the kind of data we wanted to see, I would say.
Okay.
It is, again, 4th level is kind of a tricky spot for that system too. At 1st level, you don't need to worry about it a whole lot unless you're playing an alchemist, right? Because you just don't have the items to use it on. But at 4th level, you're kind of getting enough items, but you still have a fairly low cap because it's going to be 4 plus your charisma. It means you can't just kind of use it willy-nilly. At higher levels, you expect you're going to have more flexibility with it. So we knew that this was going to be kind of a chapter where, especially like if you have an alchemist, like we had in our playtest group, it can be pretty easy to run out of it because you're getting a lot of your healing through elixirs of life and that sort of thing. So we did get some numbers on resonance from the surveys, though. And we found that fewer than 50% of characters ran out of resonance during their playthrough of Part 2.
Okay.
And then there's an exception to that, though. That's alchemists, who ran out about 1.5 times per adventure.
Yeah.
It's you have a lot more stuff you're spending.
Which I believe that's a lot of the folks that we're hearing from.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, that's right.
And now when it comes to that type of stat.
And also like groups who don't have a cleric or don't have another dedicated healer and they are like buying potions in order to keep themselves healed, their resonance is going to go really quickly too.
Right. So then with all of that in mind, what is it telling you that I'm seeing in the chat already, King of Rock is saying no extra resonant feat in the pipeline then. So what is that data telling you, knowing that the alchemist is the one that's getting the hit the majority of the time, but it's less than 50% of the overall? What is that telling you?
Well, it's telling us that, particularly for kind of this level of the game, it's telling us that you probably have about the right amount of resonance as far as using the resonance system. If we kept the rules exactly the same as they are now, that the amount is pretty close to the right number, except maybe the alchemist needs a little bit of help. Or, there's also the kind of thing we ran into in our playtest with Andrew kind of being like, I spent resonance to make this, and now somebody has to spend resonance to drink it, kind of getting double dinged on some of those items, and that feels kind of weird.
Yes.
Especially it's like, I just made this, can I just give it to the barbarian or something? Right? So that's something we might look at loosening up. We're also, and we've got a blog up about resonance today, actually, that Stephen Radden McFarland wrote. So you can find that on the PathfinderPlaytest.com. Go to the blog section. You can read that article.
And that's up today. That just went up today. Okay.
It went up just like an hour or two ago.
Nice. Okay.
And that kind of talks about more in depth some of the reasons for the resonance system, the problems it's trying to solve. And it talks about kind of how we're getting data on how people are using items based on that. But we are looking at pretty substantial overhauls for that system, because we're seeing, and Stephen mentioned this in the article, we're seeing people who have problems with it for various reasons. And we're finding that even the people who like it mechanically or don't have a problem with it mechanically, still a lot of them have a thematic problem with it where they're just like, I don't get what's happening here. Like, I don't understand why in the world resonance is a thing. And that's something we try to avoid, right? We want there to be kind of a story reason for these things. And there is one for resonance, and it's kind of tied into kind of the occultist, but it's not coming through strongly enough to really engage people on that level. So we're looking at kind of ways to revamp that system. It's kind of trying to fix a few different things, and we want to see if we can loosen it up and make it a little more fun.
Okay. Because I mean, I know for me, the idea that I keep thinking is that it shouldn't be too terribly easy when you're 4th level. Like, it should be pretty difficult still. Like, I don't know. Like, but again, because I'm Team Rogue and everybody should know that by now. When you first start as a rogue, you're not doing anything. Like, you're just getting your butt kicked the whole time. You're running around doing 1d4 damage and, trying to do something crazy, and then suddenly then you start building up that sneak attack and all that stuff. But I don't know. I don't know anything about alchemists, and I've never played an alchemist, so I don't know. I can't speak to it. So let's get into the adventure. About what happened. Like what happened during the adventure, and what did you like? What was something that surprised you? And the highlights, I guess.
So do you mean for the stream, or kind of like what groups were doing?
What groups are doing and all that kind of stuff.
So one of the things we got, especially like on the free response survey, a lot of people were saying like it kind of felt repetitive and linear. And that's because this is the first one where we're testing a very dedicated part of the adventure. And it's like, okay, we need to test these different types of terrain and see how they play. And so it is a little more restrictive, and some of those fights are pretty tough. That is going to kind of, most of the other adventures are a little more loose. I think we're going to see with part 3, like there's kind of some more role playing.
Right.
It's not quite as focused on getting at one type of data. So I think that's going to clear up for a lot of the further adventures. But this one is kind of like, all right, we're trying to kind of hammer you on this trek, and we're testing each of these encounters kind of in isolation. And we've got a time limit on you, so you're trying to get from place to place, but we kind of know the order you're progressing through them, so we kind of get a sense of how each of these terrain types is working, and how your longevity is going. So that's part of the test part of playtest, is that like some of these are going to be a little challenging, and this is not a typical adventure that we would publish, and not a typical adventure someone making their home game. Usually it's going to be like, there's going to be a couple of encounters maybe that have these tough terrain elements, but it's not going to be pervasive. And that's not what we expect, right? We don't want an adventure in an adventure path or something to be too much of the same type of encounter over and over. So this is kind of a special case in that way.
Okay.
So we see people being unhappy with that some, and that's kind of to be expected. And we saw a little bit of a drop off in the satisfaction numbers of this adventure compared to the last one, because you kind of rate it from 1 to 5 stars at the end, and we saw that this one is about a star below the first adventure, which is not entirely unexpected. And we think that'll probably trend back up with the next adventure, because of its structure, and it's a little more. You get to feel a little more badass.
Yeah,
this one kind of puts you through the ringer a little bit.
Yeah, and it really does too. I mean, it's a rough one.
Yeah, we found that. So part 1, groups rested about once. And this one they rested about 3.35 times. Okay. So they were needed to take breaks more, heal up more, and because they're on a time limit, we have a pretty good sense that 3.35 is on the low end. Okay. Like if they hadn't had a time limit, they might have rested, 4 or 5 times. It's more likely, but we think there's some time pressure there, so they probably were trying to get that done faster. Most groups, though, were able to leave before the Night Heralds got there, because they're kind of the big climactic encounter at the end of that. With the kind of rival adventuring party. Most groups were able to get the treasure, get out of there with enough time to spare that they didn't get caught out.
They didn't even have the confrontation at all. That's great. That's great.
Yeah. So I think we're seeing a lot of that. We're seeing that some of those fights people found really hard, like the elementals, for example, pretty tough. Part of that is them being immune to crits. Right. And some of them have really high defenses, like the air elemental has like an AC 20, even though it's a level 3 creature, which is super high because it's made of air. Right. So some of that stuff was kind of challenging. And we're looking at stuff like, do elementals have to be immune to critical hits? Because it's not that fun. It's kind of a thematic thing, but that is one of the things we're looking at. Maybe we don't need to do that in the final version. So
okay, so let's do this. We are coming up on about a little over 15 minutes left to go. We know there's a big update coming on Monday. I don't know if it's a big update. I'm actually talking it up, and I have no idea what's even in the update. But there's an update coming on Monday. And I thought since Jason has started, actually Jason is in the chat right now along with Stephen and Adam. And is there anybody working right now? What is going on? This is... Hey, if you want to break into the office, now's the time to do it, because they're all in the chat right now.
Please don't break into the office.
Don't break into the office. I'm kidding. Don't do that. So Jason started this idea of doing the top 5 changes that are going to be coming to the update and everything. And I've not put in a drum roll button yet, but I need to. I need to do that. So I know that you've... have prepped something for me.
For this.
And so I would like now if we could do the top 5 updates coming on Monday. Logan, take it away.
So there's one big system change. This update isn't going to have as many changes as the first one, but there's one big system change, which is to signature skills. Okay. They're going away.
Signature skills are going away.
It's going away.
That's significant.
So it's a thing that it's got a pretty big footprint, and it's changing a bunch of pieces of the rules. But for most players, the only upshot is, and for 7th level characters, because you're going to make 7th level characters for part 3. This is going to be the first time you have to worry about it. is that it's just going to be more flexible for you.
Yeah.
Because all it's doing is signature skills were essentially a limitation to kind of say only these classes can be masters or legendary at things. Now, any class can become a master or legend at any skill if they put their skill increases into it. So we're just kind of lifting that restriction. There are a few other kind of changes to the rules necessitated by that, and that's most of the text of this update is covering those. There are a couple feats that are essentially obsolete now.
Okay.
A couple alchemist feats that have just kind of gone away, and a couple other feats that have been tweaked. But yeah, the main thing is, if you wanted to be a master of crafting and you're a class that didn't have crafting as a signature skill, go for it.
That is amazing. I love that. That adds more of your personal flair, I think, into the game. That's great. Okay. Yep. Was that the first one?
That's the first one.
That's just right on Front Street.
That's the biggest change.
You put that out there right now.
Yeah.
Okay.
We also fixed some cleric spells. All these are going to be way smaller than signature skills, the rest of them. So we fixed some cleric spells.
The drop-off is extreme. Okay.
Some of the cleric lists had, because all the deities give you some new spells for your spell list. But there were a couple of them that had divine spells by accident, because you get all the divine spells automatically. And these were just to add ones that don't appear on the divine list. There were a couple of them that had divine spells because we later added them to the divine list, and we didn't go back and fix them in the deity entries. So we fixed that. So if you're, just by chance, if for part 3 you are making a cleric, you can go look at that and make sure you've got that errata to figure out what spells are on your list. The third one is something that we saw in that adventure and that I already talked about, which is that the animal totem is going to let you use weapons as long as you're not raging.
Yes.
So that's number 3. Animal totem, you can use weapons. Go into a rage, now you got to bite people, claw people, etc.
Right. Okay.
Another thing that we saw in the playtest, since we had a bard who was using the Soothe spell.
Right.
So it's a 2-action healing spell. Does a little less healing than the heal spell. But the heal spell, if you do 2 actions, you get a range of 30 feet, and Soothe was touch. We're making Soothe a 30-foot spell. So it's a little easier for the bard to use, or other occult casters like the occult.
Really opens it up a little bit more, for sure. Okay. All right.
Makes it a little easier to get the healing out there.
Yeah.
Especially since it's a little lower amount. Like a 2-action heal is still probably going to be a little stronger, unless you need to give mental defenses, which Soothe also does. So this will kind of bring it a little closer to the heal spell.
Okay.
So
is that 4?
That's 4.
Okay.
Yeah. There are a couple that we kind of added late on. So this is there's another thing for the bard. There's a couple things for the bard, but I'm going to mention this one, which is bards couldn't get a feat to cast 10th level spells.
Okay.
In the core book, even though like wizards and sorcerers could and druids. They're going to get that feat. We're going to put that in the update.
Bards are people too.
Yeah, something nice for the bards.
That's nice. Yeah. All right. So they're getting some cool stuff then. Like that. Yeah. That's a good update
nice
for them.
Upgrades.
I love the top. I love the top 5 list.
Yeah.
Reverse order it next time.
I know.
That should have been your capper. Should have been
finally signature spells. Well, we could have run out of time, and then you'd be like, "Oh, there's 4. Bye."
And then be like, "Sorry, bye." Yeah. And you're right. That's true. You're right. But yeah, anyway.
I'm going to drop one other thing, though. I did save one good thing.
Okay.
This is not in the top 5 because it's not happening this Monday.
Okay.
But the update after that, which if you've looked ahead in Doomsday Dawn, you're going to know
2 weeks from Monday.
You're going to be playing your characters from Chapter 1 again.
Right. Oh, yeah, that's right. 1, 4, and 7.
We're going to put up archetypes for all the other multi-class
No
options.
way.
Yeah.
So okay.
We're working on that. See if Jason panics in the chat.
He might.
I don't think we told him that.
Interesting.
Yeah, so if you wanted to play a multi-class with a sorcerer or a druid or whatever, we're going to have those up there.
Well, Jason's just yelling spoilers now, I think. Yeah. If you missed the very first announcement, signature skills, gone.
Gone.
Signature skills are done.
The limitation is lifted, essentially.
That's a better way to say it.
We kind of say in the update, it's like, hey, you see that list of signature skills, you can treat those recommendations because they're good for your class, but they aren't a limitation.
Right. Let's see. So we are coming up on about 12 minutes left.
Okay.
We want to make sure. So first of all, there are a couple things that we want to make sure of that is that every Thursday we are going to be doing the Doomsday Dawn stream. Each GM is coming in for 2 weeks, and they're going to do 2 sessions for each chapter, and then we're going to switch to a new group. And except for chapters 1, 4, and 7, it's going to be new people playing. For 1, 4, and 7, it's going to be the same group from chapter 1 because they're going to keep bringing their characters back, much like you do in the book. So next week, I want to let you know that Amanda Heyman-Coons is going to be running for the next 2 weeks, which is going to be really exciting. What am I missing about that? That's pretty much a good recap on that, right? Okay. I can't remember. And then I upload them. I put them up on YouTube Mondays and Tuesdays. I put them up on Mondays and Tuesdays at noon. So each week is broken into 2 parts because it's 3 hours, and I'm not going to make somebody watch a 3-hour video. So I think that covers that.
Yeah, sounds like it.
All right. We might have time for a couple questions. We have about 10 minutes. We don't want to miss, and really quick, I want to say, first of all, if you are not into spoilers, this is the weirdest part. If you're worried about spoilers, you're not watching this show right now. But if you don't want to watch somebody play through chapter 2, tonight on Twitch, you've got that Dragon show, Dragons and Things, is going to be starting up at 6 p.m. However, and they're a good time. It's a blast to watch those guys play. They're really, really good people. But also, as a lot of you probably already know, Glass Cannon is going to be playing at 5 p.m., which is why we have a hard stop time at 5. They're going to be playing their own run through of Chapter 2 in the Pale Mountain Shadow, in the shadows.
Yeah. Close enough. The shadow of the mountains pale.
Oh, man. Anyway.
Garbage Pail Mountain.
Garbage Pail Mountain. So anyway, there's some great options tonight on Twitch. If I'm running 2 people through Doomsday Dawn, do the devs want me to adjust the adventure to accommodate the number of characters? Oh, that's it. Yeah. How do we do that?
Yeah. Particularly in part 2, if you're doing that, you're just going to kill them. So if you don't adjust the adventure, so please do adjust the adventure. We have in our playtest surveys, we ask how many players you had, and if it's way outside 4, especially like 2, or you're running for 7 or something like that, we are going to kind of look at that data separately, so that we know that this is like way off the baseline for the adventure. So I would suggest kind of using the encounter guidelines in the book and to figure out how to adjust those adventures. Like for the elementals, you might try to use lower level elementals rather than like cutting an elemental and that kind of thing. But when you're doing that, if you notice anything really weird, it's like, I used your guidelines and it was way too easy when I followed the suggested adjustment for 2 players. Let us know that. There's an open response survey for each of these chapters, where because most of the surveys, it's like we want to ask multiple choice questions and that kind of stuff. The open response one is for like, here's the weird stuff. Here's something that you need to know that is like way outside what you asked in the surveys. Go to that open response survey and let us know if you notice anything really strange. If it works fine, you don't need to go to the open response survey because if it worked as intended.
Exactly. And that answers the question that came back the second time I see it, where a survey that addresses DCs, there's some people that are having issues with DCs. That open response survey might be a good place to go for that.
We also, we're still working on some more general surveys because we've been focused on getting the ones for the first couple chapters, but now that people have had a chance to play some more, we're looking at getting some more general ones up there to kind of be like, hey, did the DC seem right? Are the skills working correctly and that kind of thing. Okay.
Yeah, definitely. And then let's see, Aramel. Hey, Aramel, how are you, buddy? Let's see, thoughts on stamina from Starfinder for Pathfinder 2. Oh, mixing the stamina that you find in Starfinder and adding that to PF2.
So stamina, if anybody's not familiar with it, is kind of a way to split your hit point pool. So you have like your real hit points and your stamina points. You can get your stamina points back by taking a break and recharging those, but magic is usually going to heal just your hit points and not your stamina. So stamina is really interesting. It does help with one of the problems that we have a lot of in Pathfinder, which is like, if we don't have a healer, we're just screwed because there's no way to kind of recover. So we haven't really looked super in depth about switching it out. And part of that is kind of like the legacy of the game hasn't really had that in like from 3.5 to Pathfinder and, and so on.
Right.
So it isn't something we've looked at super in depth, but we are always kind of looking at ways to mitigate the we need a healer factor. So it is one of those things that's like, if we're finding that people are really responding like we want overwhelmingly to have ways to get by without magical healing, that might be the kind of thing we look at. Probably not exactly the same as the Starfinder system, and probably not kind of implemented in all the different ways it is, because it's also used for a bunch of abilities and stuff.
Yeah.
But it is something that it's like, it is not impossible. Like, that's something we would look at.
Okay. And then also getting back to the, they didn't find the open survey useful for the DC feedback.
Yeah, the open surveys that are up right now are specific to the adventures.
Okay, all right. Is there going to be a general open survey at some point?
Yeah. That's kind of part of the, we're getting together some surveys about big kind of overall stuff on the game. But those we've kind of been working on it some while working on all our other stuff, so they're kind of slow in coming. But we're hoping to get those up fairly soon.
Okay, all right, great.
Especially because, like, if we're making really big changes to some of the classes, we want to be able to have some early information on those classes before we even start on that kind of thing.
Okay. Let's see. Anybody run a party of all the same class, all rangers, all clerics, all bards, etc.?
That's a good question. I don't think we pulled that data, and I don't have the survey data in front of me.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to look that up.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll
interesting.
tweet you if I find anything.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Tag Paizo and I'll retweet it.
Okay.
Let's see. Looking to add any abilities for non-spellcasting healing, like a fighter yelling at his friends, "Get up, lad, hang in there," to heal them. Oh, so like a little bit of a boosting voice or something like that, I would guess.
Well, we have, the only thing we have in there right now is kind of the only thing I can remember right now, I should say, is the battlefield medic, the skill feat for medicine. So that's in there right now, so that provides a little bit. We haven't really been looking at like the fighter getting healing, for example.
Right.
Partially because we know that like people have reacted poorly to some of those kind of things in the past.
Yeah.
So we haven't looked super into that. But like I said, we are looking at ways to kind of keep yourselves going even without drinking a ton of potions or getting a ton of heal spells.
Yeah.
So.
Let's see. Sorry. So, yeah, someone's saying your voice is so deep that they're having trouble hearing what you're saying because there's rain falling outside their house. And that's on me. I should have...
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
My apologies.
We created a monster, a voice monster. I should have... I can actually level that out on the mixing board a little bit better. So next time I'll remember, I'll put more high end in your voice so it's not quite so rumbly. Thank you for loving our stream. Thank you very much. We're working very hard on this thing, trying to get it going. In fact, if somebody types in !Dan right now, Nightbot has got a little response for you there. So what we're gonna do, I think that voice monster. What we're gonna do is get ready to switch over to Glass Cannon. So what I thought would be funny is if you're a sub and you have our emotes, and we're going to raid Glass Cannon because they're going to be up and running. I think they're going to switch on at about 5 o'clock or something like that. We can raid them, and then just when we get into their chat, we'll just flame them with the flaming D20s, raining down like meteors or something like that. I don't know. We'll give it a shot, see how that works. I just thought it'd be fun. Let's see. I think that, is there something else you want to cover? We've got just a couple minutes left. Did I not give you a chance to say something that you were hoping for?
We didn't talk a lot about kind of people's impressions of the survey.
That's true. Can you do it in 2 minutes?
I can. Yeah.
All right, go.
So people viewed combat rounds as being a little longer than in part 1, probably because they had some of those kind of challenging terrain things and stuff.
Okay.
And people found combat to be a bit too long. Again, that's kind of that, you want that variety in a normal adventure. So we kind of knew that was going to happen. But I think that also kind of contributed to that little drop in satisfaction.
Yeah. I could see that. That makes sense.
And And so kind of the takeaway is use really intense tactical fights with care, right? And don't mix them too much. And this is useful for your home games too. Like, don't mix really complicated monsters with weird terrain stuff too often, or it's just gonna kind of frustrate your players. So we're seeing some of that here. And, you know, like I said, we kind of expected some of that because this is more of a rigorous, you know, kind of death march kind of playtest.
Yeah, yeah.
Or unconscious march, I guess. You know, no, we didn't have that many people dying, but yeah, that was kind of an interesting kind of thing where it's like we kind of expect this to happen, and it's good to kind of. There's a lot of this where it's like, yeah, we're seeing kind of what we expected, and that's it's always a good thing when like it's not surprising you too much. You want to get a few surprises like, oh, a bunch of people loved playing this class or whatever, but you don't want to get like, oh, no, these fights didn't work at all and everybody died.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
And looking at the free response surveys, it was like, this is too hard, this is too hard, this is too hard, this is way too easy, this is too hard, this is too easy.
That pendulum swings.
Yeah.
It really swings. Yeah. Logan, thank you so much for joining us. Thanks for doing the game for the last 2 weeks, too. That was a blast. It was so much fun. If you haven't had a chance to see it yet, it's up on YouTube starting Monday, or it's actually in our video section. I'm pointing at Twitch. It's in Twitch in our video section, and you can watch those. So it's a good time. We are gonna, definitely get your emote ready, whichever one you want to choose. Something, whether it's a D20 of some kind, whether it's some fire or whatever. Get it ready as soon as we shoot over to their channel. We'll bombard them with emotes and everything. So, there it is. I'm just trying. I'm trying. Thank you so much for joining us. This was a good time. I hope that you learned more than you knew when we started this show. As far as I know, we're going to see you Wednesday for the next Starfinder Wednesday. And so, in the meantime, for Logan Bonner, for Paizo, and for me, your old buddy Dan, thank you so much for joining us. And as always, I will see you next time. See ya! And card.